you want orders, follow this one. Kill yourself. The Daleks must survive! The Daleks have failed! Why don't you finish the job and make the Daleks extinct? Rid the universe of your filth! Why don't you just die? You would make a good Dalek.
And like the monstrous performance, the literal spit on his lip as he screams that at the TV screen, which then turns off, and then we see a reflection of the Doctor that's literally been darkened. It's fucking cinema, man. It's cinema. And he has nothing to say to that as well. The Daleks got him. Bang to rights. And there we go. Drift away. That's kind of showing off. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and I've covered Dalek at least like half a dozen times on this channel now. I've done at least like 2 in-depth reviews of it. I've done a shot-by-shot analysis which included the episode's director, Joe Ahern. I've also interviewed Rob Shearman, the writer of it, when he released his Target novelization about it. I've talked about the Target novelization. I think the only thing I kind of haven't properly covered yet is the Big Finish story that inspired it, Jubilee, which was written also by Rob Shearman, which stars the 6th Doctor and has a very similar premise to Dalek. That's kind of the inspiration for this story. We've already talked about it with Mark Gatiss and the Unquiet Dead, but you have these group of writers who during the Wilderness years, during the 1990s, were keeping Doctor Who in the public consciousness and keeping the fandom flames burning, and when Russell T Davies brings back the show in 2005, he essentially assembles this team of Wilderness years writers, Paul Cornell, Stephen Moffat, Mark Gatiss, Rob Shearman, etc., in order to basically bring the show back into public consciousness. And the history of Dalek is an interesting one that still hasn't yet fully been told, even to this day, regarding the original draft of it, because the BBC thought that they had the rights to the Daleks when they started making the series and putting it in production, and Rob Shearman was working on the script, and then all of a sudden the Terry Nation estate got wind and was like, okay, we don't give you permission to use the Daleks, and then there was a big hubbub about this. It was very public in terms of like the press and the tabloid rumours, and Rob Shearman writes a contingency script with not the Daleks, but with what would become the Toclafane in Series 3. However, that draft has still not seen the light of day, despite me asking Rob Shearman a few years ago if he still has the draft. He says he does, but it hasn't been released yet. I've got to ask though, even if it's something you never intend to release into the ether, do you still have that draft somewhere?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just hidden in a drawer.
I've still got them all. I mean, there were about a dozen. I read them all back before doing the novelization. I've not read them since, because why? And also because I thought they'd be terrible. But actually, the Toclafane episode version, the one I called "Absence of the Daleks," hilariously.
I think it's funny.
It's good stuff in it, actually. I think I did take some of that stuff for the novelization after all.
I feel that's like a Big Finish Lost Stories episode waiting to happen. You know, they've already got Eccleston and Billy Piper on board for a series. They could do a Lost Story with that. Thankfully, the BBC and the Terry Nation estate were able to come to some sort of deal, and then the Daleks appeared. And because they fought so hard to have the Daleks in this series, there was kind of no way, or also like no logistical business reason, to obscure them. They put them all over the market. They made sure that fans knew that the Daleks were coming back. The episode is literally called Dalek. They were in the Next Time trailer. They had a Radio Times cover and everything. If you have an asset like the Daleks, you don't try and keep that hidden. But while the Daleks were a pop culture icon at this point in the early 21st century, you know, they had Dalek Mania in the 60s, and then you had great stories like Genesis of the Daleks in the 70s and Remembrance of the Daleks in the 80s. They were basically a pop culture punchline at this point in the early 21st century, where, you know, they were there for ridicule. They can't get upstairs. They've got stupid voices. They have like brand deals and sponsorships with like Hamlet cigars and Kit Kats. So the big priority of this episode is, of course, bringing the Daleks back into the forefront of public consciousness, but also making them scary again. Easier said than done, considering that the iconic Raymond Cusick design of the Daleks in the 60s was very striking for the time, but even by like the early 1970s, that design was getting pretty outdated. We love stories like Remembrance of the Daleks, but even those props were just like wobbling around on their caster wheels on the cobbled streets of London. But let's not waste any more time, let's dive right into Dalek, aka Jubilee Part 2, directed by Joe Ahern and written by Rob Shearman. I'm going off of the Blu-ray version that's behind me. and let's go for it. I can't wait for this one. I'm really looking forward to this one. And I like the opening shot as well, framing the TARDIS and the BBC logo right in the centre.
2012.
Ooh, so futuristic.
That's the milometer from the Roswell spaceship.
That's a nice line.
Look at you.
Now, this is an interesting one. This is the Cyberman helmet. And the implication is that this is a Cyberman helmet from The Invasion, because of course The Invasion from the late 1960s, a second Doctor story, it's set on Earth, so it kind of makes sense that maybe some Cyberman parts made their way through the dealership route, and that's how Van Statten got it in the museum. However, the Invasion Cybermen didn't have the gun on the helmet, so this is actually a Revenge of the Cyberman helmet, which means that this is the worst episode ever now, 0 out of 10.
I found a plot hole! Nurse!
And that's great as well. The reflection of the helmet and the glass resting perfectly on the Doctor's shoulder. It's not particularly symbolic of anything. It just looks really great. It's a nice opener as well, because if you, like, let's say hypothetically, 2005, you've got fans of the classic series, or at least people who by osmosis know about the Daleks and Doctor Who, maybe tuning into this to see what all the fuss is about, and you immediately hit them with those memories of maybe hiding behind the sofa when the Cybermen were walking in front of St. Paul's Cathedral in the late 60s. Another Murray Gold track not on the soundtrack.
Attention all personnel. Bad Wolf 1 descending. Bad Wolf 1 descending.
Putting aside the Bad Wolf connection, we're going to park that for a minute, but it was great being able to chat with this episode's director, Joe Ahern, who also directed Father's Day. He also directed Boomtown, Bad Wolf, and The Parting of the Ways, a real formative director of the first season of Doctor Who. It was great being able to chat to him and learn more about the ideas that they had for this episode, where that's the opening shot there with the helicopter descending with Van Statten inside, but the idea would be that, the initial concept was that you'd have this, massive hangar rooftop, and on the roof, on the ceiling, is Van Statten's smiling face, and then it opens up and then the helicopter comes through that. They weren't able to afford or achieve that effect, but you kind of get an echo of it later when you've got this really gauche portrait of Van Statten in his office, which we're going to see in a minute.
Thank you so much for your opinion. You're fired. Get rid of it.
And that's Corey Johnson as Van Statten. Really strong first impression. And this is very West Wing. Oh dear. Bruno Langley. Oh dear. Let's ignore that.
Intruder window, that was funny. Bring him in. Let's
He is a competent and smarter Elon Musk, isn't he? That's a great fisheye lens as well, with the blue filters on it. There we go, that's the gauche portrait I was on about.
What does it do? No, it just looks silly.
This is also just a really clever scene, immediately establishing the Doctor in front of everyone as an expert in this. Whilst also, when Van Statten gets a hold of it, it's just really strong character building in these really subtle ways that you didn't notice but your brain did.
I did quite the expert.
Watch Van Statten. Tosses it aside. The antithesis of the Doctor in terms of his philosophy.
quite a collector yourself. She's rather pretty.
She's gonna smack you if you keep calling her she.
She's English too.
He keeps doing it.
Your girlfriend.
Show me. You want to see it?
Blimey, you can smell the testosterone.
If this came out in 2025, you'd get so many column inches just on that line. Euphemism?
The last guy that touched it burst into flames. I won't touch it then.
That line as well is the inspiration behind a whole chapter in the Target novelization, also written by Rob Sherman. And I would honestly, if I had the resources, if I had my own Dalek prop, I'd love to adapt that as a little short film. Like the original person who touched the Dalek and burst into flames, because it's a really fun, scary, sadistic chapter of the book. The book's terrific. We even go into the Time War. The War Doctor's in the Dalek novelization. And interestingly as well, firstly, I love this frame within a frame, but we're going to see the Dalek within 7 minutes of this episode starting. 7 minutes including the opening credits, the opening title sequence. So it's really strung efficiently. And of course, if this episode is all about contrast, you know, the contrast between the Doctor and Henry Van Statten, we've got the contrast here of the Doctor sympathetically looking at the torture tools at the beginning of the scene, and by the end of the scene, he's going to be wielding them. Oh, I got chills. It's such a strong looking prop. Like, it looks solid. And the shaking as it screams.
It's not working.
The way he looks at the gun.
Fantastic. Powerless.
It's great watching these episodes in such close proximity. Because he's laughing and smiling there, but the energy is different.
What for? What are you going to do to me? You're nothing. What the hell are you here for?
God, he's clearly got some shit to work through.
I watched it happen. I made it.
And it's not a complimentary fisheye lens, but if we are using the symbolism of the Doctor becoming a monster like the Dalek, this is the type of visual storytelling that you go for. And with a moment like that, it's kind of the first time he's externalized it.
I had no choice.
Such an intimate shot. God, he's shaking. God. They're so sassy, but they're both so broken.
Here we are.
God, he's so good here.
Yeah, okay.
And Nicholas Briggs.
Exterminate.
And co-opting the iconic battle cry as he's torturing it. And Eccleston has spoken about this in interviews and at subsequent Comic-Cons and conventions and such, but this episode was filmed shortly after, or during the passing of his father, who was suffering from dementia, a very long and protracted illness as well. Eccleston's written about it in his biography, I Love the Bones of You. I think he's trying to find catharsis in this role and an outlet for the anger of that experience, and it's coming through.
So long as I deliver the goods.
Not to say that this is a bad scene, but if you're doing a marathon, this might be the scene you go to the toilet to now.
But I honestly believe the whole universe is just teeming with life.
Yep, let him have that fun. Let him think he's the big box brain. So yeah, elephant in the room here. Bruno Langley was a big star in the early to mid 2000s, mainly known from Coronation Street. In the late 2010s, he was charged by Greater Manchester Police for 2 counts of sexual assault, which he pled guilty to. Yeah, there's a lot of elements like that in this series which have aged poorly.
Nearly caused World War III.
Hey, we talked about that last week.
Every single emotion was removed except hate. By whom? By a genius, Van Statten.
Interesting that they don't name drop Davros. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's a decision. Oh yeah, we've talked about the issues that Eccleston was having over the course of this series with his father and such, but we also know that he was struggling with his body image and struggling with anorexia as well. So a scene like this probably can't have been comfortable for him to have filmed in.
The cure for the common cold. Kept it strictly within the laboratory, of course. No need to get people excited.
That's an interesting addition as well, considering what we talked about with Aliens of London and World War III, leaning into the conspiracies that are so prevalent, particularly in the US at the time. It turns out in the Doctor Who universe, those conspiracies are true. It seems a little bit strange and even a little bit toxic in hindsight, I'm not sure, but it's clearly a through line of this series so far. And it's interesting that even 20 years later, the series hasn't actually revisited these particular threads of the Doctor Who universe. That, we got broadband technology from Roswell, they have the cure for the common cold, but they don't want to actually make it public in 2012.
Why sell one cure when I can sell 1,000 palliatives?
Oh, the enemy is capitalism again.
No one on this base is safe. No one on this planet.
Yeah, I think at this point for Van Statten, it's more of a power play. He doesn't need to analyze the Doctor anymore. I think he is just torturing him now. Maybe he likes to think of himself as above people like Simmons who are torturing the Dalek on another level, but no, we're just seeing the mirroring here. It's obviously up to interpretation, but my reading of this scene is that the Dalek is knowingly manipulating Rose here to try and get it what it wants and to try and escape here. I don't think that the Dalek is earnest in this emotional outburst of it. I think Rob Shearman has taken cues from the great David Whittaker, who was like the original script editor for Doctor Who in the 1960s, but also wrote stories like Power of the Daleks and Evil of the Daleks, where you have the Daleks who are much more conniving and sinister and manipulative behind the scenes. I think that's what scenes like this are drawing on.
Isn't there anything I can do?
Yeah, and like we've seen scenes like this with Rose already in the series, with Ruffalo, with Gwyneth. And with the Dalek, though, Rose is still earnest, but has been manipulated. Oh, and that choir, making the Dalek almost like a epic biblical threat. Oh, the majesty of it. It looks so good. Okay, and the plunger. It's been a stigma. And in like one shot and a couple of seconds, 40 years of stigma against the Dalek plunger instantly like gone. You can hear the bones crack. Oh, it's so brutal. There's a brilliant segment in the Target novel. Just read the Target novel or listen to the audiobook narrated by Nicholas Briggs. But Simmons gets his own chapter where it turns out he's like troubled throughout his entire life with headaches. And now with this, the headaches finally stop.
Release me if you want to live.
That's a great shot. And the plunger, the sucker arm. Yeah, it's so great. It's like we've never seen it do this in the classic series with that plunger arm. It's done more in about 1 minute of screen time with that plunger than 40 years of TV prior. Ooh, computer. And that beautiful bronze colour scheme as well. Like, they must have tried out different colours and different variants before settling on that bronze. But, like, obviously it's a little played out now, 20 years later. But it still looks great. It's so, like, almost regal. Off we go.
The cameras in the vault have gone down.
And we get the X-ray, like, skeleton view as they're killed from Remembrance of the Daleks as well. But yeah, it just looks so great because I know that they could have gone with almost any colour or almost like any, like within reason, almost any sort of patterning and like colour scheme on the Dalek, because basically like you can get different colour Dalek variants just as like a novelty toy, like a Union Jack one or something. You've had the gunmetal grey, you've had the white and the gold as well, and the silver and the blue and everything of the classic series. But to settle on that bronze with the blue eye and the force field as well. And the swiveling midsection, which I don't think we see again after this episode. Not to a substantial degree, at least. It's an efficient killing machine. Yeah, and because the Daleks are such a well-known, like, British commodity, like, you can have this sort of, like, knowing wink to them. Because even if you've never watched Doctor Who, by 2005, you probably know of the Daleks, and you also know of their points of ridicule. This was not the first time it had elevated. It elevated in Remembrance of the Daleks, but it's not clearly framed. And not everyone has seen Remembrance of the Daleks. And I like the gradual reveal. We learn about it through the Daleks' POV. And we can see that it's propelling itself, where it was quite vague in Remembrance of the Daleks. It's a small role, but Joanna Carpenter here as DiMaggio is good. All the cast are really good.
If the Dalek gets out, it'll murder every living creature. That's all it needs. But why would it do that? Because it honestly believes they should die. The ultimate in racial cleansing. And you, Van Statten, you've let it loose.
God, it's like every line there is like been so meticulously like edited and rewritten and re-edited just to really get across that ethos as well. Like, this is only the 5th story of the season so far. And in regards to like villainous motivations, we've had the Nestine consciousness, who is trying to like restore its food stocks after a war. We've got the Slitheen, who are a family business. We've got Cassandra, who also has business, and the Gelth wants world domination. But with the Dalek, it's like it cuts through all of that sort of rational motivation. It cuts through the rationale beyond conquering, beyond capital, to just racial purity. The word might here is doing a lot of heavy lifting. God, and that backlighting. It looks great. Ernie Vince and Joey Ahern just really know how to frame it. What to do?
It wants us to see.
That's so deeply sinister that it's completely in control of the situation and it's wanting to make a statement. And what I love about the Dalek in these scenes as well is that it's all about efficiency. Like, it barely had to move in that corridor earlier. It's a beautiful, like, perfectly crafted piece of death machinery and engineering. And all it needs is like one shot to activate the sprinklers and then like another 2 to kill everyone in that room. It could have just like killed them one at a time, but it wanted to show the Doctor what it could do. That's the David Whittaker influence, I think. Moments like that. Here we go. It's like the Daleks crying in the rain as well. Such beautiful imagery, but such a simple concept.
If you want orders, follow this one. Kill yourself. The Daleks have failed. Why don't you finish the job and make the Daleks extinct? Rid the universe of your filth. Why don't you just die? You would make a good Dalek.
And like the monstrous performance, the literal spit on his lip as he screams that at the TV screen, which then turns off, and then we see a reflection of the Doctor that's literally been darkened. It's fucking cinema, man. It's cinema. And he has nothing to say to that as well. The Daleks got him. Bang to rights. And there we go. Drift away. That's kind of showing off.
She's still down there.
Nope, superphone. Such a good plot device. Now, you look at the monitor as well, and it looks like the Dalek is moving just as quickly up those stairs. How did it catch them? Nitpick. But how on earth did the Dalek catch up to them? Maybe if, like, it went up the stair, like the middle stairway. Such a simple decision just to press enter on that keyboard, but after this, he'll never do it again.
Rose, did you make it?
Nope. Oh, here comes death. Trundling away.
It wasn't your fault. Remember that, okay? It wasn't your
And
fault.
Joe Ahern in the interview as well. These close-ups of Rose, these are actually like late in the game pickup shots because they really wanted this like front-on shot. The scene was originally filmed from that side angle of her against the door, and they went to redo it. Worthwhile decision. Oh.
It was the prize of my collection.
Your collection? Mankind goes into space to explore, to be part of something greater.
Exactly.
You just want to drag the stars down and stick them underground underneath tons of sand and dirt and label them.
It's especially prescient now, but obviously if Van Staten was around in 2025, the obvious like parallels to Elon Musk would be there, but it kind of like, this obviously by 20 years predates it. It's the idea of like space is just for him, it's not for everyone in his eyes, you know. Idealistic people like the Doctor, they look at space, the final frontier, and they see the future, whereas people like Van Staten see something to be exploited and commodified, or they see just a screensaver to be sold to the masses. Yeah, and also just I think this is up there with like one of the best ever Doctor performances as well. This entire episode, but like Christopher Eccleston in Dalek, Peter Capaldi in Heaven Sent, Peter Davison in The Caves of Androzani, Tom Baker in The Genesis of the Daleks. It's up there in regards to one of the all-time like great like performances of the program. It's stellar from top to bottom. And she's still alive. What a hard cut. I recognize you from your albums. And this is a great performance as well. It must be kind of difficult to film opposite a Dalek. And, oh, this is a great shot. So he starts in the foreground, argues with him in the background, and then comes back to the front as well. Great blocking. Like, with that line as well, it just emphasises my interpretation that the Dalek manipulated Rose in that vault. This episode really informs the decisions he makes in the Parting of the Ways.
Only the catalogue ones.
That's a great look. Like, you what, mate?
What are you gonna do? Throw your A-levels out?
God, he's so hostile to, like, young British dudes. Adam Mitchell, Mickey Smith. He's got no time for it. And the twitching of the gun. Like the recoil as the eye stalk spins. Oh, I love it. It's so great.
I just wanted you to talk! Then hear me talk now.
He's so sassy. This is like something right out of like Power of the Daleks. And the Dalek prop was deliberately designed to be Billy Piper's height, which is why it's funny when you get to Victory of the Daleks and Karen Gillan is like significantly taller than Billy Piper. Oh yeah, and this was in the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff as well. I remember going to Millennium Stadium to watch a rugby match the same year I went to the Doctor Who experience, and I wouldn't say I recognised the corridors or anything, but it's like, oh, I'm in Van Statten's museum. Ooh. It's a really bittersweet subversion as well, that you get this like almost like Spielbergian fight for freedom and this lovely affectionate ending where it wants to feel the sunlight, but we later learn that the Dalek would rather die than have that sentimentality, than feel those feelings. Like, this is such strange language for a Dalek, and the episode maybe could have taken an easier way out and been like, yeah, the Dalek is good now, it gets away, but no, it really needs to commit to the ideology that Terry Nation wrote about all those years ago, and David Whittaker and Ben Aronovich and others expanded on. And that's such a brilliant creature. It's all slimy and emotive and pulsating. It's brilliant. Like, yeah, Neil Gorton and the Millennium FX crew did such a brilliant job. This is like the best look we've ever had at a Dalek prior, like up to this point in the series, in the 40-year history of the program. We saw like a little claw in the Daleks. We see like a writhing, obscured tentacle in the Five Doctors. We see a little bits here and there, but now we sort of just look at this like creature that's killed so many and is just this weak, pathetic, perpetually dying blue blob.
Get out of the way! Rose, get out of the way now!
So I won't let you do this. It's not the one pointing the gun at me.
I've got to do this. I've got to end it. But it can't.
It couldn't kill Van Statten. It couldn't kill me. It's changing. What the hell are you changing into?
I couldn't. I wasn't.
That's the line that gets me. Sorry.
Oh, Rose, they're all dead.
It's interesting when you get the evolution of the characters in this particular series, where the Dalek learns about sentimentality and love and all that stuff, whereas the Doctor in this episode learns about, well, doesn't learn it, but like his hate progresses and overwhelms. It's like these two parallel strands in the episode. The Dalek would rather die than feel those things, but the Doctor has to live with what he's learned. Nicholas Briggs is so great here as well.
This is not life. This is sickness.
This is so legit tragic. That is a pretty cool way to die.
Feels like there's no one.
Well then, good thing I'm not going anywhere.
But yeah, really nice parallels as well, where Rose basically influences the Dalek and the Dalek can't handle it, and Rose influences the Doctor in this series and ultimately makes him a better person, and he's reborn at the end of it.
What are you doing standing inside a box?
Yeah, this is the first episode of the series where we've not seen the interior of the TARDIS as well. Oh dear, we've got the long game next week, haven't we? Not a horrible episode, but I think it's definitely the nadir of the series, despite Simon Pegg. And there we go, Barnaby Edwards operating, Nicholas Briggs voicing, and the Daleks originally created by Terry Nation. God, that's such a great episode. Yeah, I've talked about it at length numerous times before, but it really, really does stand up to scrutiny. Like, if my biggest complaint of the episode is how did the Dalek catch up to Adam and Rose while floating up those stairs, then holy shit, that's one hell of an episode. It's so like strong emotionally. The performances are incredible. I do think that this is like Christopher Eccleston, one of his finest hours like in the show as well. I think he's absolutely superb, fantastic in this episode. Billy Piper's great as well. Corey Johnson is also pulling a lot of weight as Henry Van Staten. Murray Gold's new Dalek theme is instantly like iconic and memorable. Joe Ahern does an amazing job directing the thing, and the Dalek itself is it's just a thing of beauty. It just looks absolutely incredible, and it took an antiquated design by the 1970s and really thoroughly modernized it and made it intimidating and threatening and scary. And yeah, and you know, we see one of these things committing so much brutality and violence and like sheer indestructibility and efficiency, and then when we see an army of them in the finale, then everyone's screwed. But yeah, but just like the emotions as well, just like how profound the arc of the Doctor, Rose, and the Dalek are, like in just this 45-minute episode. There's so much like strong, efficient storytelling, terrific structure, great little writing tricks and sleight of hand from Rob Sherman, who really just has done an outstanding job with this one. It's a shame that he hasn't come back to the series itself. There were attempts to bring him in for Series 5, the first series under Stephen Moffat under the new regime, but you know, he submitted some drafts, but he just wasn't really coming together. And now he's basically incredibly open on the fandom circuit and like on like at conventions and such, and always like willing to do interviews and chat and engage with people. Lovely guy. I've met him a couple of times as well. The Target novelization is superb, but also you can read his like horror anthology series, We All Hear Stories in the Dark, which is a choose your own adventure, for lack of a better term, like anthology horror series where you read the first one in volume 1, and there's 3 volumes of this, and then you essentially like give feedback on each story, and then that feedback dictates where you should read next or what story and page you should go to next. So there are like millions of combinations of stories in here. And also we've got the novelization of Jubilee coming out later this year, and also The Chimes of Midnight, which I can't wait to read and check out. The Jubilee story is like really interesting and something I probably will try and talk about in depth at some point as like a companion piece to Dalek. But yeah, Dalek is superb. Dalek is amazing. I love it. I've watched it so many times, and it just feels like every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. And I guess it's superb TV. It's peak. It's like, and the fact that it's not even like the best story of the season, in my opinion, just kind of shows how strong this initial season of the show was. But before we get to all of those great stories, we do have to have our medicine with the long game next week. Not a bad story, but I think it's the weakest of the season. And not just because of the Bruno Langley stuff. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts on Dalek and what you thought about it, and whether or not you were watching the series in 2005, and how knowledgeable you were of the Daleks at the time. Did you grow up watching them in the classic series? Did you kind of absorb them through cultural osmosis, or did you know nothing about them and this was your introduction? And if so, what an introduction. Subscribe, hit the like button, and folks, I'll see you all next time.